All right, let's get started then. So welcome to those that have joined us. Thank you for making the time today to join us. We'll run through our webinar on managing difficult employees, co-hosted by myself, Tristan at MyHR, and Delia from Better HR.
Hi, everyone.
Just before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping from us. This is a recorded session, so please be mindful that we do have a Q&A section, that any questions that you ask are at a high level, no naming names, so we can make sure that we're not breaching any potential privacy for anyone. But questions are definitely welcome throughout the session. We'll try and answer, but we will have a Q&A session at the end, and we'll follow up with a recording and of the slides, as well as a couple of extra resources to help you with what we go over today. In terms of what we're looking to cover, we'll circle out of managing difficult employees for just a brief moment and talk about a few law changes that are on the horizon for us here in New Zealand. And then we'll go into looking at managing different behaviour, bad behaviour, in the workplace, talk about the strategies that you might like to consider before you're looking at a formal process and how you work through that. We'll give you some common mistakes that we've both seen throughout our time in helping people and helping managers with these processes. And then, as I mentioned, we'll go into a Q&A section. Before we begin, though, a little bit about ourselves. So I lead the advisory team at MyHR. We manage close to about 150 let's say an average of 150 different cases in relation to either disciplinary or performance issues each month. So it's definitely something that we know inside and out. For those of you that don't know MyHR, we are a business that started in 2013, where we are the HR department, or the outsourced HR department for businesses who don't have HR. We do provide remote support through our software as well as the HR teams to help people deliver good HR practice in their businesses.
And I work for Better HR Co, and I'm one of the HR consultants here, or people and capability specialists. We are an employment and capability and development business, specialising in the human resource space. And we were established by Catherine Stapleton in 2016. And we do everything from kind of executive recruitment, governance advice, HR consultancy support, coaching and training sessions and workshops. And we work alongside businesses and organisations to create a smoother employment journey for everyone together. We all have kind of at least 15 years experience in the industry and understand the importance of having that really strong people and culture strategy, prioritising healthy and resilient working environments. So there's space for honest, constructive communication, and ensuring people can actually have those conversations even when they're tricky. So small, medium, large enterprises, we help elevate your employee engagement, build a strong employee culture, and navigate every step of the employment journey.
And the reason we're here together is that MyHR are that remote service, as I mentioned, and so we partner with Better HR to provide the face-to-face support when our clients need it. So we will provide support to the extent that we can, and then these guys step in and help with any face-to-face stuff. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Alrighty, so bit of a legal update before we get into everything else, because it's always handy to know what's going on in the world. So look, there's still a lot coming. It's not quite across the line, but we're hoping it'll be here shortly. And those things include employees being able to openly discuss or safely discuss their pay with each other at work. Because a lot of you will probably have a clause in your contracts that says they can't. So that will be a change. Protected discussions is hopefully coming, and that is so that you can safely kind of have those conversations when it's just not working out, and it's not necessarily anyone's fault, but there's things at play that just aren't working for you. So it's a safer way of having those conversations. Not here yet though. Also with that comes if you're a high earner, i.e. over 180,000K, you're not going to be able to claim unjustified dismissal, or your employees who are in that space will not be able to. And there's going to be a little bit more rigor put around PGs, i.e. if you get one little bit of the process wrong, but overall you've kind of followed the rules, that's all going to be taken into a greater consideration rather than, oh, you miss one tiny step, you're now in big trouble. And employees also where they may be obstructing or have contributed may see that those actions actually reduce their payments moving forward through the ERA, and that will follow through to mediation most likely as well. And where there's been serious misconduct at play, they won't be entitled to remedies. And the last thing that's coming is some better clarity around what is an independent contractor versus an employee, which is really helpful for everyone. The Holidays Act reform is still in its reform state. We are hoping that, well, the government are hoping that they'll introduce and pass the bill before the end of their term next year. So the targeted consultation has been completed. A number of recommendations have been agreed to, and the aim is to make the legislation more transparent and clear for everyone around how holiday pay is calculated, what employees are entitled to, and what it looks like from day one of employment. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, all right. We've been waiting for that for so long now. Yeah. Yes. Just in case anyone saw the announcement last week around the remuneration amendment bill, where that's at the moment is that it's been passed. It's passed its final reading in Parliament, but we still need the royal assent before it's actually signed off and becomes law. So you can still have those clauses in your employment agreements, but our recommendation is to start whipping them out now. It's certainly what we will do for you, just so that you're ready for when that does pass in the coming weeks.
Great.
Thank you. All right. So now on to topic. What are we looking at today? Managing difficult employees can come in many ways, shapes and forms. Commonly, we see it fall into performance or behaviour at work or conduct in the workplace. So some examples here of where when we talk poor performance, what we're considering are things like not hitting targets, not hitting KPIs, just a bit sloppy in how they're following your processes that you've put in place or the communication that they have with their clients, not getting enough work done, and the quality not hitting the mark that you're looking for. Obviously, when we miss deadlines, that's a big one. And then just general low-level complaints from customers, or maybe repetitive complaints from customers. So in summary, inconsistent performance is poor performance, rather than where we might look at a behaviour that contributes to why these things are happening in the team.
Yeah. So how do you respond to that? My goodness. There's a number of ways we can do it. It depends on what that poor performance looks like. We can look at doing nothing. That is an option, and see if the behaviour corrects itself. Maybe it's a one-off, maybe it's a little out of character, and we wait to see what happens and step in then if it doesn't improve. Depending on the situation, we might think, actually, I'm going to go see if I can find a little bit more out about what's going on, make sure I'm not missing anything. Another option is to give the feedback that you've seen it and it doesn't quite align to what you're expecting. Use that as part of kind of your regular check-ins, or however you go about, catching up with your people. And the last is just seeing if there's anything else going on, always from a place of kindness first, just to understand, is there something happening that we need to be aware of, that we can help you with, that we can support you through, because we've noticed this and it seems out of character. That's probably a good starting place, I think.
An excellent starting place, particularly if that person's been with you for a while. There is a difference, or subjective difference, on how we might manage someone who's been with you for 6 months versus someone who's been with you for 3 or 4 years in your organisation, and how you might approach giving feedback or managing issues of poor performance.
Definitely.
Yeah. The flip side to that is our behaviour side, or our misconduct side, and that's usually a little bit more clear cut than performance issues, because they're really easy to identify or to see. It's the turning up late, it's the being rude to a colleague or to a customer, or just that passive aggressive kind of undertones in how they're delivering. So maybe they are delivering the work and there's no issue with the quality of the work, but it's the style of delivering that you're noticing a little bit of an issue with. Really easy to identify when someone doesn't follow an instruction, a process, or a policy that you've got in place. We've got breaches of good faith, behaving inappropriately, sometimes known as horseplay, and then just generally being a bit of a dickhead in the workplace. One of our values here at MyHR is don't be a dick, and it's holds up for a reason. Yeah. The flip side then is where we look at serious misconduct. So serious misconduct, I describe as, it's when your stomach hits the floor, you know that this has happened, and you need to identify it and resurrect, or change, address it really quickly. One thing that we haven't got on our slide here, but is probably one of the more common ones for us, particularly in our construction industry clients, is the drug and alcohol breaches that we see quite commonly. But in summary, it's that serious inactivity or serious not doing something that you have clearly outlined. Then we've got the harassment, bullying, discrimination, that also bundles into serious misconduct. As a side note to a claim about harassment, bullying, or discrimination, there is an onus on you to investigate those complaints that are coming in from the team. So turning a blind eye to something, even if you've not seen it yourself, is definitely not the way to address those particular examples. Fraud and stealing, dishonesty, lying, they were all self-explanatory, I hope, and then major breaches of good faith. Yeah. Like just blatantly not doing what you expect of your team.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess good faith is one of those things that very much underpins the employment relationship, right? It's in our Act, in the Employment Relations Act, and that clearly states, as you can see on the slide, that parties must not do anything to directly or even indirectly mislead or deceive each other. And both parties need to be active and constructive and need to be communicative. So neither side gets to kind of throw their hands up in the air and go, no, it's all on you. You have to work through it together, regardless of the situation, even when it's going pear-shaped. So that's very much on both sides, and it gets messy when one side decides not to participate, and it happens.
Definitely happens more often than not.
100%.
Yeah, it's also why employment legislation is not black and white. We can see that something's happened, but we've still got to come from and meet good faith obligations as the employer. So that means that following the process that isn't outlined in legislation but is very much adhered to is absolutely the number one must do when looking at serious misconduct.
100%. And look, we've got a question here that kind of aligns to this discussion, which is, what rights does the employee being accused of serious misconduct by another employee have? And that's where you have to follow your process. When it comes to those bullying and harassment type complaints, they need to be properly investigated. And if you kind of look at what's online, they do suggest it needs to be someone independent of the situation, to ensure that it's done appropriately, because any kind of bias can then be played in if they're not independent. So that's something to think about there.
When we say independent, in a small organization, we realize that might not always be, well, it comes at a cost if you have to engage somebody. So in the example that, both employees report directly to yourself as the manager, it would be having a different manager or, maybe a director or shareholder step in to manage that process. So it doesn't necessarily have to be external party, but we need to make sure that we can demonstrate that there has been a consideration of both sides, because coming back to natural justice, it is innocent until proven guilty, right? So that's what we're looking to sort of achieve there.
Yeah, definitely.
And the flip side, sometimes in those investigations, you find that it's actually the complainant, right, who is making things up. And that's exactly why we must go into an investigation in these examples.
Yeah, definitely. Alrighty. So you'll also find when you get into these situations, that when you start doing the letters and stuff, you get into a lot of legalese. And so the key kind of things that you need to understand is that substantive justification versus the procedural fairness. So we need to ensure that we're giving the information that we have, all of it, to the employee, and not hold anything back that we're going to use to make our decision. We also need to ensure that our discussions and our processes are kept confidential regarding that employee. So no one else should really know that the process is happening for them. Obviously, we can't stop them from talking to who they feel they need to talk to, but we can make it clear to them as well in this process around confidentiality. We need to ensure that people have the opportunity to provide feedback, and where they do provide feedback, that we fairly consider it. We need them to have the option to seek advice or bring a support person along with them if they want to. And at all times, we need to ensure that we're acting in that good faith again and being fair and reasonable under the circumstances. So kind of almost remove yourself from the situation, put it in another business and think, if that was happening over there, would I think that was fair? Is one way to try and remove what is usually quite an emotive feeling for everyone involved.
Absolutely, yeah. Coming back to the confidentiality around, particularly if you're dealing with allegations, you have to investigate it. So you have to talk to others in the business to say, what do you know? What have you seen? Does this behaviour like ring any bells when I describe it, without talking about the individuals in the first instance? So when you're having those conversations as part of your investigation, excuse me, it's really important that we are starting the discussions with those people that you're interviewing with the, hey, this is a confidential process, and your information today may be shared with others in the organisation, but please don't discuss it further. So again, you know, like we're trying to keep the lid on it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't want it to become something bigger than what it needs to be.
No. Right, so how do we respond? Or how can we respond? So as we touched on earlier, you've got informal options of particularly in the case of a performance issue, you might want to understand what's going on, what's happening with that person. But likewise, when you're looking at misconduct in the business, you might want to have a formal discussion that is not a disciplinary process. You just want to know why Delia was late for work today. You know, it's really out of character. You're usually so sharp and on time.
And yet here we are. What a day to pick.
So MyHR, we recommend a record of discussion rather than relying on a verbal warning in those examples. That's a record of discussion is just simply you recording what you've discussed with the employee and what has happened and the agreed outcomes. So you can hold them to account and hold those expectations. So when Delia's late next week, we can then look at an alternative way to manage it. In the example of its poor performance and low-level poor performance, or just something you can't quite put your finger on, you might decide to put a performance improvement plan in place. The idea or the goal of any PIP is that you're going in to support the employees' uplift in their performance. So we've got to make sure that any PIP outlines how we will, as managers and employers, uplift that performance. So what training can I go back over? What other support can we give? And then regularly review it. Have it in place for 4 weeks, but have weekly check-ins. So you're clearly communicating to the person that, yeah, you're on track. Actually, this is great. Good stuff. You've turned up today, Delia. Well done. And then we could, if we don't feel that either of those lower level ways to address, we could look at disciplinary action or just starting a disciplinary process off the bat.
Yeah.
Oh, I expected that to come up on one slide. So as I mentioned in the previous, a record of discussion is just a one-pager where you're meeting with the employee. You can scribble this out, go in, set a little agenda, talk to them about what your concerns are, what you have noticed, observed, are worried about. Give them an opportunity to say, oh, well, yeah, I didn't come in today. Crazy story. The battery in my key fob went flat and I couldn't find another one and I had to wait for an Uber. Sorry, should have rang you, but it won't happen again. I'm going to go and buy two batteries today. So I've got a spare at home, and you agree on the outcome, and then that's signed. You can put that in your MyHR employees files, and then you've got it there, and it's that accountability that you've acted in good faith, you've addressed those issues, and the employee is on board with where you're going. The reason we do this over a verbal warning is because a verbal warning doesn't stack up, because we've not got any follow through. We haven't got anything written down on paper. And so many times we hear from people, we've talked about this 10 times, and the employer's just like, never, ever have I ever heard you say that to me. Which I get, that's not good faith, but it happens. And so we're trying to look at options to counteract that happening in your business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the other added bit to that, Tristan, is sometimes people don't want to hear it, so they also just kind of ignore it. But when it's in black and white in front of them, they they kind of have to acknowledge it.
It's harder to say, I've never been late for work, when it's there and you've recorded it. Yeah. Here's an example of how we might put a PIP together. As I mentioned earlier, we want to identify what training, what support we've given to support the uplift in performance. We want to clearly articulate what are the concerns, what do we need to see happen to change or to recorrect the performance. Sometimes it's really simple. It's a one-liner, just don't do this anymore and we'll be okay. Other times, you might need to put in place a checklist so that we're itemizing what needs to happen. It's retraining, as I've mentioned. It could be in the case of a sales where someone's not hitting a sales target, you might decide that for a 3-month period, you'll reduce the sales target to help adjust that behavior and support them to increase their sales. There are many ways that we can carve this up, but the crux of it is that whatever you put into the PIP, you must follow through with, and you must regularly connect with that person throughout the process, so that at the end you can say yay or nay to we've seen this correct, or we haven't seen this correct, and so we need to look at other options to manage.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a question here around is one PIP enough to determine an outcome for a disciplinary if they've not quite succeeded it? And I would say yes, unless there's situations outside their control for not reaching it. However, that doesn't mean the PIP ends. It means it continues, and you'd have kind of that first disciplinary meeting to see if it warrants a written warning, and you'd step through the processes from there, but continue with the PIP as part of the outcome as well.
Yeah, exactly that. When we say situations outside of the control, I've seen bad examples of where a PIP's in place for 4 weeks, but the employee in that 4-week period has had pre-approved leave. It's not fair to say you're not going to achieve this, or you haven't achieved this, when you've already said it's okay to be away for 2 weeks. So, it's making sure that we're setting them up for success. So in that example, it's a 6-week PIP. So you've got 4 weeks work to gauge and to rate.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, disciplinary. So the disciplinary process, this is when we start getting into, well, how does this all run? So we've got a formal consultation process with the employee. What it means is it could result in a formal or final written warning, or in worst case scenarios, dismissal. There needs to be substantive justification and procedural fairness. So you really need to dot your I's and cross your T's with all of this. The consultation process is required, and the employee has certain rights. So this is where the process is crucial for you. So the employee, like we said earlier, needs to know everything that may be material to the decision that could land them with a warning or dismissal. They are allowed to request more information if it is relevant, and they need to have a reasonable amount of time to seek advice and prepare a response. So that would usually be a number of days, not here's a letter, let's meet in an hour kind of thing. They have a right to representation or support, and they get the right of reply to the decision makers, i.e. whoever is having the meeting with them. So that's all kind of crucial stuff, and we'll get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of what that looks like for you in the next slides.
Delia, can I ask a question of you?
Sure.
When the support person is a colleague, how do you feel about that?
When they bring their colleague along?
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, I always think people are allowed to bring along whoever they want to. I would always ask them, are they sure? If they say who they're bringing along and it's a colleague, are you sure you want them to know all this information about you?
Yeah.
Because that's the key bit, right? As long as they're comfortable with that person knowing all of that, then that's up to them.
And particularly where you've got an environment where your team is made up of family members, we see that quite a lot. And you know, the warts and all story in those examples, isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I would also recommend that you remind the support person that this is also a confidential, process. So they should obviously not discuss with other employees outside of the who's in the meeting and involved.
Yeah, 100%. What goes on in the room stays in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So, prep and kickoff. So stage 1 is really gather all your information, document the situation, and outline the potential consequences. Prepare a script. Highly recommend this because you'll always feel a little bit nervous walking into one of these meetings. And when we're nervous, things just fly out of our brain, and we don't want to miss any of those crucial steps, like if they don't have a support person present, asking them, are you sure you want to continue without one? Crucial things like that. We're recording the meeting. I'm going to hit record now. These are the people in the room. Just having all of that scripted just makes life a little bit easier on the day, and also helps you stick to the facts. And you can call that elephant in the room, saying, look, I've prepared some notes so that I don't miss anything off. You then need to, once you've got all of that sorted, notify your employee of the process in writing. So a letter for them that outlines the allegations, the supporting info, and how you know it's not acceptable. The potential outcomes. So in here you would have whatever the worst possible outcome could be for the meeting. That doesn't mean that you need to deliver that outcome necessarily. It just means that the employee is informed on what the worst possible outcome for them could be. Outline when you want to ideally meet with them, their right to seek advice, and ask them to respond ideally by a certain date and time. And if you haven't heard from them by then, you'll assume that they're turning up. And then making sure that you are ready to get into that meeting. So stage 2. Now you can have a notepad to record the responses, but I also would recommend recording the meeting, particularly if you're not strong at note taking. These things move quickly, and us trying to write as fast as people speak is often hard. It also gives you a really clear outcome of the meeting should you ever need it.
Reference to come back to.
Yeah, that's the one I'm after.
Yeah.
So at the meeting, the key thing is to kind of go through those things I talked about before. Are they comfortable proceeding if they don't have a support person? We're here today to meet regarding the letter, put those allegations to them, do not introduce anything new. And then it's handed over to them to tell their side of the story effectively. You will have people who will go 100%, it was me, I did it, I'm sorry, whatever. And then you'll have the polar opposite where it never happened, it wasn't me, it was everything else. So through that process, depending on what you get handed and what you do and don't understand, this is where you can ask questions to clarify, but again, don't add extra info in. Once they've kind of said their piece, ask if they've got anything else to add, and then adjourn the meeting to consider their feedback.
As an observation, with the rise of AI, we in our team are definitely seeing more written responses rather than verbal responses coming through. It's an interesting way to engage in good faith. There is no harm in providing a written response, but it doesn't sound like the person that you've known for 3 years.
Yeah, definitely. So then it's determining your outcome, and this will be slightly different based on what that potential outcome could be. But definitely document your response to their feedback where you can. Confirm what the outcome is when you re-adjourn the meeting, then get that through in writing. It depends on what the situation is and the process that you're following, but you definitely need to let them know. Ideally, where you can have that in writing first, but if not, you can still deliver it and then follow it up.
100%. Like, so at that lower level formal warning where it's for repeated lateness, you might be, in a space where you can say, look, thanks for your feedback. We've considered it. It's been a couple of hours. We're going to proceed with the warning, just letting you know, and follow up the next day with that in writing. Just to put that employee at ease in that sort of situation. If it was more serious, if we're addressing serious misconduct, that wouldn't be our recommendation. We would be definitely saying more time is warranted, just not to play the game as such, but so that you can demonstrate that you have considered the feedback, and then that you're following a good process in terms of communicating and writing to the employee, so they're fully aware of where you're at and what you're thinking as well.
Yeah, what your decision kind of process has been. And if you are at the point where you're dismissing someone, you have an extra step as well. So rather than just saying, we've considered your feedback and it's now dismissal, you actually need to propose that dismissal. And so what that looks like is that extra step of reconvening, saying, look, we're proposing dismissal and here's all the reasons why. And again, this is a preliminary outcome with this proposal, and I would put that in writing as well. You'd then give them time to add anything extra that they may have at that point, adjourn, and then finalize that outcome. So it takes a little bit longer around that dismissal, but it adds some rigor to help with that process to remove some risk.
Yeah, it's an insurance policy.
Yes, 100%.
Okay, so now we'll look at some examples where disciplinary might be appropriate. So we touched on it earlier. You don't necessarily have to have had a PIP or have a discussion prior to. You can go straight to considering disciplinary outcome. So an example of misconduct, that might be where you've had a phone call. I've just seen one of your cars driving really ridiculously. They were on the opposite side of the road, going around a blind corner, overtaking whatever. And you can see from your GPS data who was in that car, and you've got a record there of what their driving has been like. So in that sort of example, you might just go straight to a formal warning. Sorry, straight to the consultation process to deliver a formal warning. In the case of poor performance, where we've got an example here of someone who's consistently missing a sales target, that you might do the consult to get a formal warning, but put a PIP in place at that point. Ongoing issues. So you've had John, he's repeatedly late. You've addressed that in a formal warning. This time he loses his temper and he has a little mini outburst, which is not appropriate. You can use, even though those two things aren't related, you can use that previous disciplinary to leverage and start talking about termination at that point. You can't do that if John's only been late once. That's not what a fair and reasonable employer would do. But where you've built on the warning process, you can definitely consider termination for different reasons or justifications. And then we've got our serious misconduct piece here, the negligence piece, where your finance manager has just simply ignored a piece of work, a request, something's happened that's resulted in significant harm to your business, or a serious breach of your trust and confidence in that employee, and that's where you're thinking about summary dismissal. And again, making sure that we go through that process. On summary dismissal, when we think about serious misconduct, quite often the question that comes through to us is, can we suspend this person from work? Yes, but not in all cases is that considered fair and reasonable. So a very easy example of where it is fair and reasonable is where you've got somebody who is on a construction site who's failed a drug and alcohol test. You can't, in good faith, put them at risk by knowing that they're under the influence of whatever and continue working. That's a serious breach of your trust and confidence, so that's locked down. You can look at suspension in that instance. Again, suspension needs a proposal before you confirm it. So we've got a little step there. Come and talk to us about that little step to make sure that we're ticking all the procedural boxes for you. In the example where you can put a check and balance in place. So somebody is falsifying their timesheets and fudging their hours of work a little bit. If you've got CCTV that can clock when that person arrives and when they finish, you've got a check and balance in place. So again, it might be a breach to your trust and confidence, but it might not warrant suspension. So again, talk to us. We're happy to help and to provide guidance and a view on that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So what are the common mistakes that we see all the time, Tristan?
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
And they kind of contradict each other in patches. So what do you need to avoid in these situations? Moving too slowly, dragging it out, waiting too long to deal with the issue. But on the flip side, if you move too quickly, you might miss crucial information that you then actually need to be able to make the decision. So these are things that can trip people up along the way. Definitely never hold any information back. If you're using it, if it's part of your decision-making process, it needs to be shared. behaving unfairly or unreasonably as an employer or treating employees very differently. This is kind of where favoritism sometimes comes out, and what you kind of need to do is take a step back and go, if this was anybody else, what would the situation be? What would I be doing if it wasn't this person? And that works with biases in every direction, right? So take that person out of it, put somebody else in there. Would I be doing the same thing with them? Not following up on a PIP or post-disciplinary commitments kind of makes the whole thing fall over. So it's crucial to, if there's actions to be done, making sure that you follow through with them. Don't be too severe with your outcome if it's not necessary, and not giving employees enough time to get advice or to prepare a response will be deemed to be unreasonable. So always keep that in the back of your mind, and if you're not sure, call, ask. The team is here to help.
Absolutely. One thing we haven't talked about in the severity of an outcome is just because you commence a disciplinary process doesn't mean that you have to end with a warning or termination or whatever. It's being fair and reasonable can look like going in, making sure that you've given all of the information to the employee, and then going, hey, didn't know that, thank you very much, and backing away. When that happens, the key to that is following up in writing so that we don't have a open-ended kind of investigation taking place. We've circled back and we've confirmed what our outcome is going to be.
Yeah. And in that situation, to be that there is no further outcome.
Yeah.
We heard what you said, and this is now closed.
Yeah,
effectively.
pretty much. Yeah. Cool. Great. So as we mentioned earlier, we are going to follow up in an email. So you'll get the slides, you'll get the MyHR disciplinary process guide, and we'll also provide a couple of sample documents, an invitation letter to kick off that consultation with your people, and an example of what we might put in a meeting guide and script, so that you, like Delia said, remember to cover off all the important bits and don't forget when you get in front of your people.
Yeah.
That'll be with you in the next couple of days. Right, we've got some questions.
We do. And the first one is from our first slide, one of our first slides. I'm going to say I think it was eligibility rather than edibility. Because edibility means food. So I think it was eligibility.
Yeah.
So thank you to that person.
Yeah, sorry.
It's our typos. It had to happen somewhere.
Yeah.
What rights does the employee being accused? Oh, we covered that one off, I think, earlier. People who have a husband and wife duo as the owners around, and one of the employees is accusing them of being a bully, it would probably be in their best interest to get someone external in to investigate that situation. It would be quite unique to a small business, I think, and probably the safest port of call. But again, it's one of those case-by-case situations, and seeking some advice is always best.
Yeah, we've definitely seen it quite a bit, and often we, if the financial costs of having a consultant come in is prohibitive, then what are our other options? Are there other directors outside of the husband and wife team? Are there shareholders that we can look at? You know, like someone who's got a connection to the business, but still, you know, not in that particular relationship.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
How to manage misconduct when there is, I guess, neurodivergency diagnosis in play. So the employee is technically excellent, but destroying the team culture.
Yeah, that's tough, isn't it?
Rough.
Yeah.
And I think depending on what the level of the misconduct is, it could be starting somewhere with a PIP rather than jumping straight into misconduct. It would be understanding that situation a bit better, but yeah, you still have to manage the misconduct. It's just being aware of those additional factors that are at play.
Yeah. And sometimes it's you know, it's as simple as slowing down the process. So with another employee, you might give the information in writing and then give them a couple of days to prepare a response. With this particular person, you might look at, you know, a week. Case law does say anything up to 10 days is fair and reasonable. So just making sure that you're accommodating wherever possible and however possible.
Yeah, great advice. Can the record of a discussion be in the form of an email that captures location, attendees, summary, what was agreed, actions, etc.?
The recording of it and sharing it with the person, 100%, but that shouldn't replace a conversation. It's really important to keep talking and to make sure that, you know, the employee understands why you're coming from the angle that you're coming from, as much as having a response and listening to their side. So
yeah,
talk to your people is always the first piece of advice.
Yeah, but if you don't have access to the MyHR tools, then yeah, an email would suffice. It's just you've then got to file that somewhere so that you can get your hands on it easily,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
How to best access the record of a discussion on MyHR in print or forward record of discussion. So I think that's
one I can pick up perhaps and come back to, because it's quite specific.
Yeah.
Instruction. Yeah.
We did that one. Do we let the employee know that we are recording the discussion somewhere for reference when we give the verbal warning? So I think with the record of discussion or however you're doing it, letting them know during that discussion, hey, I'm going to document this. You'll get a copy either through MyHR or via email, however you're doing it, but make it really clear that you are documenting it. So yes, definitely tell them so that they're not blindsided. Always best. My organisation uses supportive improvement plans first, then moves to a PIP. Is that common?
It's not unheard of.
Yeah.
It's like Delia said at the beginning, it's coming from that place of kindness, right? So absolutely, it's a good tool, and I guess the important bit is that consistency piece. So making sure that that is your process with all of your team, if that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and as long as it's clear, if they're still not going, like if they don't reach it, what does that look like? Sorry, someone's added something and it completely disappeared where I was at. If you choose to record the meeting rather than writing notes, can the employee refuse this? So if the employee I've never had an employee say no so far. I've had them ask for the recording. If they said absolutely not, because you'd have this conversation before you hit record, it would be trying to understand why not, because it's also in their best interests. And if they absolutely didn't, because I can see someone's put single party consent. As the employer, though, there's a power imbalance. So if they really didn't want it, I would probably suggest taking notes and being really, really clear that the employee did not want it recorded.
And the other, if you're going into a situation where you think someone is going to be combative and that might be their response, go in with two people.
100%.
Like someone, actually go in with two people wherever possible,
Yeah.
to avoid a he said, she said kind of scenario. But if you go in, I'm going to lead today, but I've got John with me. John's going to take notes, so that we've got a record of our discussion. That's absolutely, acceptable. What's not great practice is going and compiling your notes after your meeting. So there is case law that has found that that's not good practice at all, because we misremember how things, or the order in which we've discussed things, or how facts have been presented to us. And also it's that classic, 10 people in the room, you say the same thing, and 4 people have a different interpretation of what you've said. So the note taking, whether that's audio or in writing, while you're at that meeting is the threshold that we're aiming for there.
Yeah. And wherever possible, you can put it in the invitation letter that the meeting will be recorded, so that they come prepared.
Yeah.
So that helps as well. Yes, I did mention that the employee could bring whoever they want to a disciplinary meeting. So for example, are there any limitations? Can they bring an ex-employee who's been terminated, or someone who's damaged their relationship with the business? Could it be considered a conflict of interest for them if that support person and the person managing the disciplinary have had previous conflict? Unfortunately, and we do see this, and there are some advocates out there who are would fit into this space of ex-employees who go after their ex-employer. Unfortunately, just make sure you're really well prepared, have that script, listen to what they've got to say. You can't really change who that support person is.
I've just noticed the time, so while they're enjoying the questions.
Great questions.
I think we could maybe look at one more and then wrap up. Delia and I will come back in writing and cover off any other questions that we haven't covered in the discussion today.
Yeah. So last quick one. Does the support person get to speak on the behalf of the employee? I would usually ask the support person to clarify what capacity are they here for. Are they here as a support person or as a representative? And what that means is, if they're a support person, i.e. the person's partner, for example, then they get to sit there quietly and support that person while they talk. If they're representing the employee, then they do have the right to speak on their behalf. So it's just clarifying what their purpose is.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your time and for joining us today. It's been a little bit of fun. Way to mix up our Thursday morning.
Yeah.
We've left our contact details here so that you can reach out and ask us specific questions. And like I said, we'll come back and we'll answer the questions that we didn't get to. But yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.